Go right ahead.
All right. Okay, now I just have a number of comments. You can sit down, Alan, thank you. Every time we discuss one of these projects, there are folks who come and talk to us about their philosophy against TIF financing and developer incentives. And usually I don't spend much time contradicting those, and I'm not going to today, other than to say, you know, for every study or anecdote against TIF financing, there is a plethora of information that shows that this kind of economic incentive is very effective. And sometimes I wonder what city folks are living in when they talk about the negative or the lack of results from TIFs. I mean, if we look at the first Old Town TIF we did, it's generating an excess today and may have the possibility, if we voted already, previous council, to end it early. Central and Hillside TIF has gone well. Even the TIFs that are approved, have been approved later. The Old Town Cinema TIF, which was in the newspaper recently, is scheduled to generate an excess of $2.some million. And the Water Walk TIF, while the development has been slower than expected, is still happening, and that TIF is scheduled to pay off. So for the folks who come down and anecdotally talk about the disasters related to TIFs, it's certainly a different perception than mine. In terms of reviewing this project and wishing we had more time to do it, yes, there are some folks who have not had time to look at this project as much as our staff has had and as much as city council members have had, but the project has been under development for a long time, and I think it's been gone over with a fine-tooth comb many, many times over. For the folks who talk about and ask what has real development done in this community, sometimes it's hard to see because you don't see all of the rental space that they have renovated and rented, which is in excess of 600,000 square feet of space. And you don't necessarily see the facade improvements because you're focused on driving down Market and Broadway and Douglas rather than looking up at multi-story buildings. But they have accomplished a lot, and they've done it with a $30 million investment in our downtown. And that has happened in a relatively short period of time. We have been working to recruit that kind of development for at least 15 years, and we finally have it. And now we question whether or not it makes sense to continue in that vein. And again, I wonder what kind of sense that makes. Even real development is paying more taxes today. As Vice Mayor Longwell said, this is not a tax abatement project. They are currently paying, or when they came to town and purchased buildings, they were paying $251,000 in property tax, and records now indicate that's up to $569,000 a year in property tax, and that's only going to increase as they make investment in these buildings. So they are certainly paying their share of taxes. In terms of the risk on this project, we need to remember several things. One is that we have built into these estimates a 1% allowance for property tax appeals, which has historically been the case in our TIF districts. However, an offsetting component of this project is that the developer agreement requires that real development meet with the county appraiser every year and provide financial information about the properties and about their operations, which will allow those appraisals to be very realistic based on actual data compared to what happens with many appraisals, which is a drive-by with a camera. That means with more realistic appraisals that there's going to be much less room for appeal, which means that I think that 1% that we have built in there is a very, very good cushion and probably higher than it needs to be. The other thing we need to remember is that the property tax increases, the increment that's being calculated in this project includes only the buildings in this project. The district is larger, but in this the calculations don't include any other property tax increase in that entire district over 20 years. And I think it's pretty unrealistic if there's any property owner in that district that thinks their property value is not going to increase over 20 years. That's probably pretty unrealistic, but we're not counting that increase at this time in this project. And I think for good reason, because we need to allow room for other TIF financed projects in the district. We would hope that that would occur, but it's unrealistic also to think that every single property in there will take advantage of tax increment financing. So I think, again, that's a conservative factor we need to consider. In terms of the actual risk of this project getting built, I think the risk to it being built is almost zero because of the way HUD requires that the funds be amassed and set aside ahead of time in escrow. The funding will be there. The funding goes directly to contractors and to vendors, which means the project is certainly going to be built. It's not a phased project, as is one that is frequently mentioned, for example, Water Walk, where we're dependent on an economy to bring other investors to the table and new business. This project is assured of being built. Just a couple of other things I want to mention is that, trying times are the times that we need to look for those kind of investments that really can move us forward. I think we'd be foolhardy not to consider the fact that in this project, Key Construction alone, we heard last week, is looking at $17 million in labor going into this community. That's 250 jobs in this community over 16 months. And what are we as a council willing to do in this case? To walk away from that investment, to walk away from those jobs? I think it would behoove us to look very seriously at those. $650,000 in sales tax in this project, I think, is no small number. It's very important that we consider that. This project is going to be a catalyst project. There's no question about it. We've talked for a long time about needing several things, and those have been mentioned today. There is a demand for apartments in the downtown area. Not everybody wants a large house at the suburbs with a lawn. There are people who look for smaller units in urban areas, and they're popping up all over Wichita, and they're asking for this kind of living. The parking, there's no question. Even people, I've gotten emails of support, and I think the rest of you have too, even from folks who typically don't support developer incentives are supporting this project because they realize the importance those 250 plus parking spaces are going to bring to downtown. And having the residents down there, I think, will give us, should almost move us to the tipping point that the retail experts have been telling us about getting a grocery store in downtown. I mean, we're not going to get one until we have enough people living down there that will stop in and buy bread and milk on the way home. And I think this is going to get us very, very close to that. And then lastly, having some significant redevelopment along Douglas, I think, is one of the catalyst pieces that we've been waiting for. We've had lots of work done in Old Town. We have the arena, which is just off Douglas. Lots of things, but we haven't had a really big project on Douglas, and I think this will make a difference. I've got